Jin Woo sat on the cold stone floor and looked at his cellmates. The first human was a man about his own age with short black hair and scars covering his arms. His name was Taemin, and he had been in the arena for 3 months, somehow surviving 4 fights. His eyes were hard but not hopeless. The second human was a woman with long hair tied back and intelligent eyes. Her name was Hee Jin, and she had been captured from a research ship 6 weeks ago. She had only fought once, but she was smart, and had learned much about how the arena worked by watching and listening. There were other prisoners too. A creature with blue skin and too many arms sat in one corner, making sounds like singing. A giant, insect-like being clicked its mandibles nervously, near the bars. Even a small furry creature that looked almost cute was there, though Taemin warned that it could spit. Acid Hee Jin explained the rules of the arena to Jin Woo. Every prisoner had to fight, she said. The crowds wanted to see blood, and Death and the Emperor wanted to keep his people happy. Most fighters died in their first match, but some got lucky and survived long enough to fight again. The arena had levels, she continued. New prisoners fought other new prisoners first. If you won, you moved up to fight stronger opponents. Each level was more dangerous than the last. At the top level, you faced the champions, creatures that had won many fights and earned the right to kill freely. But above all, the champions was the Titan Taemin, said with fear in his voice. The Titan was not just a champion, it was something else entirely. It stood 4 meters tall, and its body could change from flesh to metal in seconds. Its claws could cut through anything, and its roar could break stone. No one had ever beaten the Titan. Hyejin added it had been fighting in the arena for 50 years and had killed over 1,000 opponents. The crowds loved it more than anything else. When the Titan fought, the entire empire stopped to watch. Every prisoner knew that eventually they would face it and die. Jin Woo asked what happened to those who refused to fight. Taemin showed him scars on his back from energy whips. The guards had ways to make you fight. He explained pain that could drive you mad, or drugs that made you attack anything that moved. There was no choice but to enter the arena when your name was called. That night, Jin Woo lay on the stone floor and listened to the sounds from above. The crowd was watching fights, and their voices came down through the walls like distant thunder. He could hear metal clashing against metal and sometimes screams that made his skin crawl. But there was something else, a sound that came during the quiet moments between fights. It was deep and sad like crying, but too low for any human to make. It seemed to come from far below, even deeper than the holding cells. Jin Woo asked Taemin about it, but the other man just shook his head. That is the Titan, Taemin whispered. It makes that sound every night when the fights are over. No one knows why. Maybe it dreams of the creatures it has killed. Maybe it is just going mad from all the killing. We try not to think about it. The next morning, guards brought food and water. The food was gray and tasteless, but Jin Woo ate it anyway. He needed strength for whatever was coming. The guards looked at him and laughed, calling him small and weak in their harsh language. But Jin Woo had been called worse things before. Hyejin told him about the other prisoners who had come and gone. Some had been brave and some had been cowards, but all of them were dead now. The arena did not care about courage or fear. It only cared about entertainment. The crowd wanted a show, and they always got one during the day. More prisoners arrived. Some were warriors from planets Jin Woo had never heard of. Others were criminals or rebels or just people who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. All of them had the same look in their eyes, fear mixed with hopeless rage. Jin Woo spent his time watching and learning. He noticed how the guards moved, and when they changed shifts, he studied the locks on the cells and the layout of the corridors. He memorized faces and voices and tried to understand the politics of this place. 3 days after his arrival, a guard came to his cell. The creature was smaller than the soldiers who had captured him, but still much larger than any human. Its armor was decorated with symbols that Jin Woo was beginning to recognize as marks of rank. Your time has come, little human, the guard said in broken human speech. The crowd grows bored with the current fighters. They want fresh blood. Your blood? Jin Woo stood up slowly, his heart beating fast, but his face calm. Taemin grabbed his arm and squeezed gently. Fight smart, he whispered. Use your size against them. Big creatures move slow. Jinwoo nodded and walked toward the cell door. His first fight was about to begin. Jinwoo wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the broken mining drill one more time. The machine was old and tired, just like everything else on this empty planet. He had been working alone here for 6 months, fixing equipment that should have been replaced years ago. The pay was good, though, and he needed the money to send back to his family on Earth. The planet had 3 suns that never seemed to set properly, making the sky always look orange and angry. Jinwoo had grown used to the strange light and the way it made shadows dance across the rocky ground. He lived in a small shelter made of metal sheets and ate food from cans that tasted like cardboard. But the work kept his mind busy and his hands moving. He was reaching for his wrench when the ground started shaking. At first he thought it was another earthquake. The planet had them all the time because of the mining operations. But this shaking was different. It had a rhythm to it, like giant footsteps. Then he heard the sound of engines roaring overhead. 3 massive ships appeared in the orange sky. They were black and covered in spikes like angry metal beasts. The ships landed with thunderous crashes that made Jinwoo stumble backward. His shelter shook and pieces of metal fell from the roof. He had never seen ships like these before. They were built for war, not mining. The doors of the ships opened with hissing sounds and soldiers poured out. They were huge creatures standing twice as tall as Jinwoo. Their skin was gray and rough like stone, and they wore armor that made them look even bigger. Their faces had too many teeth, and their eyes glowed red in the strange light. Jinwoo tried to run, but his legs felt like water. The soldiers moved faster than anything that big should be able to move. They surrounded him in seconds, laughing with voices that sounded like grinding metal. One of them pointed at Jinwoo and said something in a language he did not understand. But the meaning was clear. They thought he was funny. The leader of the soldiers was even bigger than the others. He had scars covering his face and arms that told stories of many battles. His armor was decorated with bones from creatures Jinwoo hoped he would never meet. This leader looked down at Jinwoo like he was looking at an insect. The leader spoke in broken human language that he must have learned from other prisoners. "You are small," he said with a voice like rocks falling. "You will make the crowd laugh before you die." The other soldiers laughed too, and the sound made Jinwoo shiver. They grabbed him with hands that could crush his bones without effort. Jinwoo tried to fight, but it was like trying to fight mountains. They threw him into a cage made of energy that burned his skin when he touched it. The cage floated in the air and followed them as they walked back to their ships, as they carried him away. Jinwoo watched his shelter burn. The soldiers had set it on fire just for fun. The flames consumed everything he owned: his tools, his books, even the picture of his family that he kept by his bed. 6 months of work and life turned to ash in minutes. Inside the ship, Jinwoo found himself in a room filled with other cages. Some held creatures he recognized, but most contained beings he had never seen before. All of them looked scared and angry and hopeless. The room smelled like fear and pain and something else he could not name. The journey through space took many days. Jinwoo used the time to watch and listen. The soldiers talked constantly, and he began to understand some of their words. They spoke of their home world and their emperor, and something they called the arena. They also spoke of their champion, something they called the Titan. When they mentioned the Titan, their voices changed. Even these giant warriors seemed afraid. The Titan had never lost a fight, they whispered. It was bigger and stronger and meaner than anything else in the galaxy. It lived to kill, and the crowds loved to watch it work. Jinwoo listened and learned and tried not to think about what was waiting for him. The ship finally stopped, and Jinwoo saw their destination through a small window. It was a city floating in space, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a giant flower. The city had towers that reached up into the darkness, and lights that never stopped blinking. At the center of the floating city was the arena. Jinwoo could see it clearly now. It was shaped like a flower made of metal with petals that could open and close. The petals were opening as they approached, revealing a pit in the center that was dark as a grave. The soldiers saw him looking and laughed again. "Soon, you will be down there," one of them said. "Soon you will meet our champion." Soon you will die. But Jin Woo was not thinking about dying. He was thinking about living. He was thinking about his family back on Earth and the promise he had made to return. To them, he was thinking about the other prisoners in the cages around him and how they all deserved better than this. The ship docked with a sound like thunder. Jin Woo felt the artificial gravity change and his stomach turned. The soldiers opened his cage and dragged him out into a corridor filled with more soldiers and prisoners. The noise was incredible. Voices shouting orders and crying and laughing and cursing in 100 different languages. They pulled him through the corridors deeper, into the arena. Jin Woo tried to remember the way they came, but there were too many turns and too many doors. Everything looked the same. Metal walls and harsh lights, and the smell of fear. Finally, they reached a heavy door that opened to reveal stone steps leading down into darkness. The steps led to the holding cells deep beneath the arena. The cells were carved from rock and lit by torches that gave off smoke and strange smells. Jin Woo could hear water dripping somewhere in the darkness, and the sound of creatures moving behind metal bars. They threw him into a cell with several other prisoners. The door slammed shut, with a sound like a tomb closing. Jin Woo looked around at his new cellmates and saw something that gave him hope. 2 of them were human like him. The stone steps leading up from the holding cells seemed to go on forever. Jin Woo climbed them with guards on either side of him, their weapons ready, in case he tried to run. But running was the last thing on his mind. He was thinking about what Taemin had told him about fighting smart. The sound of the crowd grew louder with each step. At first it was just a rumble like distant thunder, but as they climbed it became a roar that shook the walls. Thousands of voices calling for blood and death and entertainment. Jin Woo had never heard anything so loud or so hungry. Finally, they reached the top of the steps and a door made of thick metal slid open. The light that poured through was blinding after the darkness of the cells. Jin Woo squinted and stepped out onto the arena floor. The roar of the crowd hit him like a physical blow. The arena was enormous, much bigger than it had looked from the ship. The floor was covered in sand that had been stained dark by the blood of countless fighters. High walls surrounded the fighting area with seats rising up in circles until they disappeared into shadows. At the very top, Jin Woo could see the emperor sitting on a throne that floated in the air. The crowd was a mixture of species from across the galaxy. Some looked like the soldiers who had captured him, while others were completely alien. There were creatures with tentacles instead of arms, beings made of what looked like living rock and things that Jin Woo could not even describe. All of them were screaming for his death. On the other side of the arena, another door opened and Jin Woo saw his opponent. The creature was from a species called the Zeth, according to the announcer who spoke in several languages. It stood 3 meters, tall with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. Its skin was covered in natural armor and its mouth was full of teeth like daggers. The crowd cheered louder when they saw the Zeth warrior. This was clearly a favorite. It flexed its muscles and roared. Showing off for the audience, Jin Woo could see scars on its body from previous fights, but also symbols carved into its arms. Each symbol represented a kill. A horn sounded, and the fight began. The Zeth warrior charged across the arena sand, flying from its feet. Jin Woo waited until the last second, then threw himself to the side. The crowd gasped as the massive creature thundered past, unable to stop its charge. Jin Woo had learned something important about big creatures from his work with mining equipment. They were powerful, but they could not change direction quickly. The Zeth slammed into the arena wall with a crash that shook the ground. It turned around, slowly shaking its head in confusion. The second charge was more careful, but Jin Woo was ready. He ducked under the swinging claws and rolled between the creature's legs. The crowd was getting confused. This was not how these fights usually went. The small human was supposed to die quickly, not dance around making the champion look foolish. Jin Woo noticed something during his dodging. The Zeth was breathing hard. Its natural armor was heavy, and all that charging was tiring it out. Big muscles needed lots of oxygen, and this creature was not used to opponents who made it work for its kills. The third time the Zeth charged, Jin Woo did something unexpected. Instead of dodging away, he moved toward the creature at an angle. The warrior tried to grab him with 2 of its arms while slashing with the other 2. But Jin Woo slipped past the claws and got behind his opponent. Before the Zeth could turn around, Jinwoo jumped onto its back. The creature roared and tried to reach him with its claws, but its arms were too bulky to bend that way. Jinwoo wrapped his arms around the warrior's thick neck and squeezed not to choke it, but to find the right spot. Every species had weak points. Jinwoo had learned this from studying alien biology during his engineering training. Even the mighty Zeth had a nerve cluster at the base of their skull that controlled balance and movement. Jinwoo pressed his thumb into exactly the right spot, and the giant warrior crashed to the ground. The arena fell silent. The Zeth was not dead, but it was unconscious and completely helpless. Jinwoo could have killed it easily, but instead he stepped away from the fallen creature and looked up at the Emperor. The crowd began to stir, confused by what they were seeing. "Kill it," they began to chant. "Kill it, kill it, kill it." But Jinwoo just stood there, his arms at his sides. The Emperor leaned forward on his floating throne, his eyes fixed on this strange, small human who had won without dealing death. The horn sounded again, ending the fight. Guards rushed onto the arena floor to drag away the unconscious Zeth. Jinwoo was led back toward the entrance, but he could hear the crowd talking in excited voices. They had never seen anything like this before. As he walked down the stone steps back to his cell, Jinwoo could feel eyes watching him from every direction. Word would spread quickly through the arena about the human who fought like no one else. The small creature who won without killing had just made himself very famous. Back in the holding cell, Taimin and Hyejin crowded around him asking questions about the fight. Jinwoo told them what had happened and saw hope flicker in their eyes. Maybe there was another way to survive in this place. Maybe mercy could be stronger than murder. But Jinwoo knew this was just the beginning. His next opponent would be stronger and more careful. The arena masters would not let him embarrass their champions again. The real test was still coming. Word spread through the arena like wildfire about the human who had won without killing. By the next morning, every prisoner, guard, and official knew about Jinwoo and his strange victory. The other prisoners looked at him with new respect, while the guards seemed less sure of themselves. Arena Master Grex came to visit Jinwoo personally. He was a fat creature covered in jewelry and expensive clothes that did not hide the fact that he was basically a merchant of death. His small eyes glittered with anger as he looked through the bars of the cell. "You made my champion look like a fool," he said in perfect human language. "You will pay for that embarrassment. The next fight will not be so easy. Little human, I will make sure of that." Jinwoo met his gaze calmly, which seemed to make the arena master even angrier. But despite his threats, Grex could not hide his excitement. The crowd had loved the unexpected show, and unexpected shows meant more money. Broadcasts of the fight were already being sent across the empire, and betting on Jinwoo's next match was reaching record levels. Over the following weeks, Jinwoo faced bigger and deadlier opponents. Each time, the arena masters tried to find something that would finally kill him. But each time, he found a way to win without taking life. His methods were always different and always surprising, against a poison-spitting creature from the swamps of Vega 4. Jinwoo used the arena sand to create a cloud that confused the beast. Then he tricked it into spitting its venom at its own reflection in a polished shield. The creature knocked itself unconscious with its own poison. When faced with a heavily armored warrior that moved like a living tank, Jinwoo noticed the fighter was overheating. Inside his metal suit, Jinwoo kept the warrior chasing him around the arena until the heat and exhaustion caused him to collapse. His victory condition was always the same: knockout, not kill. The crowds began to change their chanting. Instead of screaming for blood, they started calling his name Jinwoo, Jinwoo, Jinwoo. Some even began to cheer when he showed mercy to his defeated opponents. The arena had never seen anything like it. Between fights, Jinwoo spent time talking with the other prisoners, learning their stories and sharing his own. Taimin told him about Earth and how beautiful the mountains looked during winter. Hyejin spoke about the research she had been doing on peaceful contact between species. These conversations helped Jinwoo understand something important. Humans were not just physically different from other species, they thought differently too. Most galactic cultures believed that strength came from the ability to destroy, but humans had always found strength in the ability to create and protect. The Emperor himself began to take interest in Jinwoo fights. He would come down from his floating throne to watch from closer seats. Sometimes he even visited the holding cells to speak with this strange human who was changing how his people thought about combat. The Emperor was old for his species, with scars that told of many battles in his youth. His voice was deep and commanding, and when he spoke, everyone listened. He asked Jinwu why he refused to kill, why he showed mercy to those who would have killed him without hesitation. Jinwu answered honestly, saying that killing was easy, but choosing not to kill required real strength. Anyone could destroy something, but it took wisdom and courage to find another way. The Emperor listened carefully to these words, though he did not seem convinced. "You are weak." The Emperor said finally, "Mercy is the luxury of those who have never faced real enemies. When you meet a true killer, your soft heart will be your death." Jinwu nodded respectfully but did not change his position. As the weeks passed, Jinwu victories made him famous across the empire. People on distant worlds watched his fights and argued about his methods. Some called him a coward, who was afraid to finish what he started. Others said he was showing a new way of thinking about conflict. The other prisoners began to look at him differently too. He was no longer just another victim waiting to die. He had become a symbol of hope, that maybe there was a way to survive in this place without losing their humanity. The guards noticed this change and it made them nervous. Arena Master Grex was caught between anger and greed. Jinwu was making him rich but also making his other champions look weak. The betting pools were enormous and the broadcast rights were being sold for record amounts, but the old system of simple violence was being questioned. Finally, the pressure became too much. The crowd was demanding to see Jinwu face his ultimate test. They wanted to know if his mercy could overcome the greatest killer in the arena. They wanted to see him face. The Titan Grex appeared at Jinwu's cell one morning, with a smile that did not reach his eyes. The guards behind him looked excited and scared. At the same time, Jinwu knew what was coming. Before the Arena Master spoke tomorrow, "You face the Titan," Grex announced. "The crowd has waited long enough to see if your weakness can stand against true power. 50 years, and over 1,000 kills, the Titan has never lost and never shown mercy." Jinwu felt his cellmates tense around him. Taemin grabbed his arm tightly while Hyejin covered her mouth with her hands. They had all hoped this day would never come, but deep down they had always known it would. "The Titan fights tomorrow night," Grex continued. "The entire empire will watch. You will finally learn what real strength looks like, little human. And when you die screaming, the crowd will remember why mercy is for fools." That night the sound from below was louder than ever. The deep crying noise that came from the Titan holding area seemed to shake the very stones of the arena. Jinwu lay awake listening to it and wondering what kind of creature made such sounds. Thought about his family on Earth and whether they would ever know what happened to him. He thought about all the opponents he had faced and how none of them had truly wanted to fight. They had all been prisoners, just like him. Most of all, he thought about the Titan and what 50 years of forced killing might do to any living creature. Even monsters could feel pain and loneliness and the need for something better. Jinwu fell asleep, wondering if the great champion of the arena might be the most imprisoned of them all. The morning of the final fight arrived gray and cold in the holding cells. Jinwu woke to find guards already waiting outside his cell. Their faces were more serious than usual, and they carried heavier weapons. The entire arena was buzzing with excitement for the main event. Taemin and Hyejin barely spoke as they shared what might be their last meal together. The other prisoners watched Jinwu with mixtures of hope and fear, knowing that his defeat would signal the end of any dreams they had of survival. Through mercy, news came that the Emperor had declared a holiday across the empire so that everyone could watch the fight. Millions of beings would witness whether the human philosophy of mercy could stand against the ultimate expression of violence. Even creatures who had never cared about arena fights were placing bets. As the day wore on, Jinwu could hear construction sounds from above. They were preparing something special for this fight. The regular arena setup was not enough for the Titan. Extra barriers were being built to protect the crowd, and additional cameras were being installed for the galaxy-wide broadcast. Finally, evening came and the guards arrived to escort Jinwu to his fate. But something was different this time. Instead of the usual small group, there were dozens of armed guards. They formed a protective box around him as they walked through corridors that were packed with officials and VIPs. The stone steps seemed longer than ever as they climbed toward the arena floor. Jinwoo could hear the crowd above, and it sounded like the ocean during a storm. Hundreds of thousands of voices merged into one enormous roar that grew louder with each step. When they reached the arena entrance, Jinwoo paused. The guard captain noticed his hesitation and sneered, "Still time to beg for mercy, human, though it will not save you." Jinwoo shook his head and stepped forward into the blinding light. The arena had been transformed for this special event. The walls were covered with banners and lights that flashed in patterns matching the crowd excitement. The Emperor throne had been moved down closer to the action and was surrounded by the most important beings in the Empire. But all of this faded into the background when Jinwoo saw the other side of the arena. A massive cage was rising from depths he had not known existed. The cage was built from metal bars as thick as trees, and it took a dozen mechanical lifts to raise it to floor. Level inside the cage, something moved that made Jinwoo blood run cold. The Titan was even larger than the stories had described. Standing 4 meters tall, its body seemed to shift between flesh and metal, as if it could not decide what it wanted. To be, its eyes glowed like stars, and when it breathed, steam rose from its nostrils. The crowd fell completely silent as the cage reached floor level. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The announcer voice echoed through the arena, but Jinwoo barely heard the words. He was focused entirely on the creature that was about to be released. The Titan looked directly at him across the arena floor, and Jinwoo felt something he had not expected. Instead of the mindless hunger he had seen in other fighters, there was intelligence in those glowing eyes. There was also something else, something that looked almost like sadness. The cage door opened with a sound like thunder. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the Titan to charge across the sand and tear the small human apart. But instead, the great creature just stood there looking at Jinwoo with what seemed like curiosity. Jinwoo realized that everyone expected him to run or cower or beg for his life. Instead, he did something that shocked the entire arena. He walked slowly toward the Titan, his hands open and empty at his sides. The crowd began to murmur in confusion. As he got closer, Jinwoo could see details that were not visible from a distance. The Titan's skin was covered in scars from thousands of fights, but also symbols that had been carved deliberately. These were not battle wounds, they were decorations or maybe even words in some ancient language. More importantly, Jinwoo could see tears. There were actual tears running down the Titan's massive face. They fell like small rivers, cutting paths through the dirt and blood that covered its features. This was not the mindless killing machine that everyone believed it to be. The Titan watched him approach but made no move to attack. When Jinwoo was close enough to touch the creature, he stopped and spoke in a voice that somehow carried across the silent arena. Despite being barely above a whisper, "I see you," he said simply. "I see your pain." The Titan eyes widened, and it made a sound that was not quite a roar and not quite a cry. Jinwoo realized that this creature had been waiting 50 years for someone to see it as more than just a weapon of entertainment. The crowd was becoming restless. They had come to see violence and death, not whatever strange moment was happening in front of them. The Emperor stood up from his throne, his face dark with anger. "Fight," shouted someone in the crowd. Soon others picked up the chant. "Fight, fight, fight." But neither Jinwoo nor the Titan moved. Instead, something even more remarkable happened. The Titan slowly sat down on the arena floor, making the ground shake. Its massive head came down to Jinwoo level, and it looked at him with eyes that held 50 years of forced killing and loneliness. Jinwoo reached out slowly and placed his small human hand on the Titan's enormous claw. The touch was gentle, like someone comforting a hurt animal. The great creature shuddered, and more tears flowed down its face. The crowd noise faded to confused whispers. This was not what anyone had expected to see. The most feared killer in the galaxy was crying, and a small human was trying to comfort it. The entire foundation of what the arena represented was being challenged. By this simple act of compassion, the Emperor's voice cut through the silence like a blade, demanding that his champion destroy the human immediately. But the Titan just looked at Jinwoo, and in that look was a question that had never been asked in 50 years of fighting. The question was simple. Do I have to kill anymore? Jinwoo sat down on the arena sand facing the Titan close enough to see his reflection in its glowing eyes. The crowd had gone completely quiet, unsure of what they were witnessing. The Emperor stood at the edge of his floating throne, gripping the railings with enough force to bend the metal, in a voice that somehow reached every corner of the massive arena. Jinwoo began to speak. He talked about what he saw in front of him, not a monster, but a creature that had been captured and enslaved, just like every other prisoner in this place, a being that had been forced to kill against its will for the entertainment of others. The Titan listened to every word and slowly began to make sounds in response. At first, they seemed random, but Jinwoo realized it was trying to communicate. The creature was attempting to tell its story in the only way it could through gestures and simple vocalizations that had not been used in decades. Through patient listening, Jinwoo began to understand the Titan had once been called something else in its own language, a name that meant gentle mountain. It had lived on a peaceful world with its family creatures like itself who were herbivores, despite their fearsome appearance. They had been gardeners and builders, not warriors. The Corvan Empire had discovered their world and decided that such large, strong creatures would make excellent arena fighters. They had killed the Titan family and destroyed its home, taking only the strongest specimens for their games. The creature now known as the Titan had been fighting unwillingly for 50 years, waiting for someone to see its true nature. As Jinwoo repeated this story to the crowd, some of the aliens in the stands began to shift uncomfortably. They were realizing that their entertainment had been built on the suffering of kidnapped beings who had never chosen to be warriors. The comfortable distance between audience and prisoner was disappearing. The Emperor could see his control slipping away. He gestured angrily to his guards, ordering them to force the fight to continue. Armed soldiers began marching onto the arena floor, their weapons powered and ready. But as they approached, something unprecedented happened. The Titan stood up, its full height casting a shadow across half the arena. But instead of attacking Jinwoo, it moved to protect him. The great creature placed its massive body between the human and the approaching guards. Its message was clear: if they wanted to hurt Jinwoo, they would have to go through the champion first. The guards hesitated, facing the Titan was supposed to be a death sentence, but this creature was defending the very human it was supposed to kill. The crowd was becoming more confused by the moment. Some were shouting for blood while others were calling for the guards to stop. From the holding cells beneath the arena, other prisoners had heard what was happening. They began to shout their support for Jinwoo and the Titan. Their voices carried up through the stone floors, adding to the chaos. Some guards ran down to quiet them, but found themselves facing cells full of beings who were no longer afraid. Jinwoo stood up and walked past the Titan toward the Emperor's floating throne. His voice carried across the arena as he issued a challenge that no one had ever made before. He challenged the Emperor to come down and fight his own battles, instead of forcing captured beings to die for the entertainment of others. "You call yourself strong," Jinwoo shouted, "but you hide behind walls and guards. You force others to kill while you watch safely from above. True strength means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. True courage means standing up for what is right, even when you are outnumbered." The crowd was now completely divided. Some cheered for Jinwoo's words while others demanded his immediate execution. The Empire was witnessing something it had never seen before. A direct challenge to the system that had kept millions entertained and distracted for generations. The Emperor's face was dark with rage. He ordered his guards to kill both the human and the Titan. But as they raised their weapons, something else happened. Other prisoners were being released from their cells by guards who had grown disgusted with what they had witnessed for years. Taemin and Hyejin appeared on the arena floor along with dozens of other fighters who had been waiting their turns to die. They stood with Jinwoo and the Titan, forming a circle of beings from across the galaxy, united by their shared suffering and hope for something better. The Titan looked around at all these smaller creatures who were willing to stand with it despite knowing they could be killed for their defiance. For the first time in 50 years, the great creature felt something it had almost forgotten: the warmth of friendship and the possibility of freedom. The Emperor realized that his arena, his symbol of power and control, was slipping away from him. The crowd was no longer unified in their bloodlust. Some were questioning why they enjoyed watching captured beings fight and die. Others were remembering their own worlds and wondering if their loved ones might be imprisoned somewhere. Jinwoo reached out and took the Titan massive claw in his small human hand. The contrast was striking, but the message was clear. Size and strength meant nothing compared to compassion and courage. The Titan gentle squeeze in return showed that it understood. Story reached its climax with the Emperor facing a choice that would determine the future of his empire. He could order his entire army to crush this rebellion and return to the old ways of violence and control, or he could listen to the small human who had shown that even the mightiest warrior could choose mercy over murder. The crowd waited in tense silence as their ruler considered his options. Around the galaxy, millions of beings watched their screens wondering if this moment would change everything or if it would end in a massacre that would be remembered for generations. Jinwoo stood with the Titan and their fellow prisoners waiting to see if 50 years of forced killing could finally come to an end. The great creature that had been known as the champion of death had found something worth living for the first time since its capture. The final image showed Jinwoo hand resting on the Titan claw, while creatures from across the galaxy stood together in defiance of a system built on their suffering. Whether this moment would spark a revolution or end in tragedy remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the arena would never be the same again.